So we'll quickly review chapter 2 before we begin chapter 3. So at the end of chapter 1, Arjuna has put his bow and arrow down, sitting very dejected. And chapter 2 begins with Krishna chastising Arjuna, saying, "Where have these impurities come from? How come you have become so impotent?" That too on the battlefield. But Arjuna still is filled with doubt, so he tries to defend himself. And he defends himself by saying, great personalities like Bhishma and Drona are worthy of my worship. How can I kill them? Instead of killing them, I would rather give up my kingdom and beg for a living. And then he also expresses his confusion and bewilderment and his indecisiveness when he says, I really don't know what is better. Is it better for me to conquer them or for them to conquer me? And finally, he says, I really don't know what to do. I'm in a terribly confused state of mind. I'm surrendering to you, Krishna. Shishya steham. I'm becoming your disciple. Please tell me what I need to do. So then Krishna begins to counter all of the arguments put forth by Arjuna, both in chapter 1 as well as in chapter 2. So in chapter 2, we talked yesterday that this is a summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita is actually in chapter 2. So if you're not able to read the Bhagavad Gita in its entirety, if you read chapter 2, you pretty much have a fairly good understanding of what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. So it's the second longest chapter in the Bhagavad Gita besides the 18th chapter. So it has 72 verses. We discussed that the single word summary for chapter 1 is lamentation. Arjuna Vishada Yoga. He's lamenting, he's dejected. And in chapter 2, he's exhibiting symptoms that suggest that he's forgotten who he is and what his duties are. He's forgotten that he is a Kshatriya. And Kshatriyas have a specific duty and responsibility towards society. It's for them to provide good governance. It's for them to protect dharmic principles. They should not allow dharmic principles to degrade. If they allow that to happen, then they are not worthy of calling themselves Kshatriyas. So the single word summary for chapter 2 was that Arjuna has forgotten his identity. Identity as a Kshatriya, but also identity because he was all of the reasons that he was providing to Krishna as to why he could not fight were actually based on the bodily platform. So in chapter 2, Krishna talks about Jnana Yoga. Of course, he begins with Sankhya Yoga, where he says, there's a difference between the body and the soul. Everything that you've talked about until now, Arjuna, is purely based on the bodily platform. None of your weapons can kill the soul, because the soul is eternal. You are focusing a little too heavily on the bodily platform. So Sankhya Yoga and Jnana Yoga, where Krishna explains the difference between the body and the soul, that we are eternal, all of us are eternal. And for the Jivatmas, we don't have a choice, but we have to change bodies as long as we carry influences of our past activities in the form of karma. And Krishna explains, just like the body undergoes changes, right? What happened to your body as an infant? None of us remember what our body looked like as an infant. That experience is gone. So change is the only constant here. So the soul is just like a driver sitting within the machinery of this body. The body is just temporary. We have to switch bodies at the time of death. Of course, if we are intelligent, we don't want to keep taking birth again and again and again and going through the same cycle again and again and again. If we're really intelligent, then we want to stop this cycle of birth and death. And to stop the cycle of birth and death, Krishna gives various forms of yoga that one can practice to ultimately go back to the spiritual abode. Krishna explains that you're worried about Bhishma and Drona, but you need to know that they will acquire new bodies. And death is inevitable, and so is birth. And Krishna describes the qualities of the soul. It is imperishable, it is indestructible, it is unborn, it is eternal, it is permanent, it is primeval. And just like a person changes the dress, if your dress or outfit gets old, you replace it with a new attire. So similarly, when the soul is ready to take on a new attire, it exits the body. Vasamsi jirnani. It's just a change of clothes, Arjuna. Don't be perturbed by it. And then briefly, very briefly in Shloka 26, Krishna talks about atheism. He says, well, if you don't believe in the difference between the body and soul, and if you think this is just you have one life to live, why not just completely enjoy yourself? But you see everything around you perishing. Then why are you lamenting for loss of chemicals? So just briefly, Krishna talks about atheism in one shloka, 2.26. If the body is all in all for you, then it's just a degradation of chemicals, that's all. The chemicals fall apart, that's it, over. And then he says, but if you believe in the body and soul, and if you believe in karma, then you do your duty and don't worry about the consequences. Then Krishna talks about karma kanda. He says, performing your duty is far more important. Even if you're interested in a particular desire or an outcome, then just perform your duty and then enjoy the result. What's wrong with that? So this is called the karma kanda. Karma kanda means you perform your duties because you want to enjoy the outcome. So the Vedas have a karma kanda section. And then Krishna reminds Arjuna, do you really think that people will say Arjuna is so compassionate? He loves his family so much. That's why he gave up his kingdom. Krishna says, that is not going to be your reputation, Arjuna. Your reputation forever will be that you were afraid. You left the battlefield out of fear, not out of compassion. You are a Kshatriya, Krishna reminds him. For a Kshatriya, dishonor is worse than death, Krishna says. A Kshatriya would rather die than be dishonored as being weak, impotent, incapable of performing their duty. And Krishna further says, people will speak unkind words of you forever. They will not forget. this incident, Arjuna, if you walk away from this battle. They will scorn you forever. And then Krishna says, fight for the sake of fighting. Forget about happiness and distress. Fight as a matter of duty. Don't worry about the consequence. The consequence could be you lose. The consequence could be you win and enjoy yourself. But you must perform your duty. That's your responsibility. And then Krishna talks about Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi Yoga, which is working without being attached to the results. So Karma Kanda means you work, but you're interested in the outcome. You are very invested in the outcome. Buddhi Yoga means you work, but you don't worry about the outcome. You simply love doing your duty. Krishna also talks about Bhakti Yoga here in this chapter. He talks about Sakama Karma Yoga, then Nishkama Karma Yoga, and then Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So we will discuss the different yogas in today's chapter. But there is a very famous shloka in chapter 2, which we did not cover yesterday, which is the shloka 47. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma kaleshu kadachana ma karma palaheturvu ma te sangosva karmani. So Krishna reminds Arjuna that everybody has a right to perform action. Everybody has a responsibility to perform their work. But Krishna says you are not entitled to a particular outcome. You are not entitled to the fruits of your work. Nor are you the cause of the result, Krishna says. You, at the best, you can perform your duty, but you are not the cause of the ultimate result that you get. That result is in my hand. And then Krishna also tells him, you should not be detached from performing your duty. That is something one should never do. Work as a matter of duty and be detached from the results. So when Krishna talks about Bhakti Yoga in shlokas 50, 51, 52, and 53, he talks about the results and the superiority of Bhakti Yoga over Karma Yoga, over Jnana Yoga, over Sakama Karma Yoga, Nishkama Karma Yoga. He talks about the superiority of Bhakti Yoga. And he says, when you start performing Bhakti Yoga, which is taking the shelter of Lord Krishna and worshipping him, you get multiple results. The first thing is that you get rid of your karma. Your karma stops immediately. Second thing Krishna reminds Arjuna is if you perform Bhakti Yoga, another benefit is that you stop the cycle of birth and death, which is what should be our goal as well. The third thing Krishna says is we become indifferent to Vedic rituals. So in chapter 2, Krishna actually criticizes those who are attached to rituals. You know, you just do things because it is a habit. There is no devotion there. There is no love there. You're attached to just performing ritualistic activities, you know, doing arati, this, that, and the other, but not expressing your love for the Lord as you're doing it. You know, a lot of us will sit down and recite Vishnu Sahasranam and recite a whole lot of other shlokas. But if the love for the Lord is not blossoming within us when we are reciting the shlokas, then that is just a mere ritual, Krishna says. Don't be too attracted to what is in the Vedas. So when you perform bhakti yoga, you become indifferent to rituals. You're far more interested in your experience of loving Krishna from your heart, not by memorization, just reciting shlokas with no love for the Lord. Bhakti yoga involves your heart. It has to, because that's where the experience of bliss lies. One doesn't experience bliss just by routinely chanting shlokas. You can memorize thousands and thousands of shlokas, but by just memorization alone doesn't give you love for Krishna. And then Krishna says, when you practice bhakti yoga, you achieve samadhi or divine consciousness. So at that time, Arjuna asks 4 more questions. You talked about samadhi. I'm a little bit curious. These people who practice bhakti yoga and who achieve a pure state of consciousness, can you tell me what are the symptoms of these personalities? What are the symptoms of the sthita prajna? Those who have situated their consciousness in Krishna and Krishna alone, hence the title Krishna consciousness. Arjuna asks, these people who practice Krishna consciousness, what are their symptoms? How does such a person speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he hear? How does he walk? How does he engage his senses? So Arjuna is curious to understand what are the symptoms of those personalities who are practicing bhakti yoga. And Krishna begins to answer his questions. And chapter 2 concludes with Krishna saying, whatever I have spoken right now, Arjuna, if anybody follows those instructions and lives their life according to my instructions, they will reach the kingdom of God. So that's the last shloka in chapter 2. That if you practice bhakti yoga or any of the other yogas, ultimately your destination is the kingdom of God. So the summary for acronym for chapter 2 was Gita. We began with understanding what is surrender and what is the qualifications that one needs to have to surrender to the Lord or to Guru. It requires eagerness. It requires acknowledging that you're weak. You don't have all of the answers. And with humility, you approach a guru to understand what is it that you need to do. We also understood the difference between the gross body and the subtle body. At the time of death, you have to give up your gross body. At the time of moksha, you give up your subtle body. Your subtle body comprises of mind, intelligence, and false ego. We also talked about 2 dharmas, Swadharma and Nitya Dharma. Swadharma is everything on the bodily platform, which is what Arjuna has been speaking up until now, or the reasons he gives as to why he should not fight. But Krishna has reminded him he also has a duty to the soul, which is a much higher duty. And Krishna also talks about, in the context of the sthita prajna, the person who practices Krishna consciousness, how do they replace their lower desires with desires on the spiritual platform, thus coming to the platform of bliss. So with that, we'll begin chapter 3. I want to offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today we're going to talk about what is renunciation, what is regulated activities, what are the qualities of leaders who lead exemplary lives, and who is our real enemy. This is what we're going to discuss today. So the acronym for today is TREE. What is renunciation? Tyaga. How does one regulate one's activities? What is exemplary conduct for that person who's a sthita prajna? How do we conquer our enemy, our eternal enemy, Nitya Vairi? Eternal enemy, Krishna says in chapter 3, lust. So in this chapter, because Krishna has established the identity for Arjuna in chapter 2, once you know who you are, then the next logical thing is, what should you do? What's your duty? What's your responsibility? Once you know who you are, you should understand what is your duty.
Surrender.
Surrender, yes. But here, the single word summary for today's chapter is duty in the form of karma. What is our duty? So, chapter 3 begins with Arjuna asking a question. You see, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is asking questions to get clarity. So, the first shloka, Jyayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tatkim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. Translation, Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is better than fruitive results. You see, in chapter 2, Krishna has talked about the yoga ladder. From Karma Kanda to Karma Yoga to Jnana Yoga, he does not speak about Dhyana Yoga. Then finally, Bhakti Yoga. So Arjuna is very clever, you see. He's paying very close attention to what Krishna has said so far. And he's asking a critical question. Two ways in which you can look at this. First is, Krishna, you said Nitya Dharma is more important than Swadharma, which is duties on the platform of the spirit soul is more important than duties only on the platform of the body. But then fighting a battle is on the platform of the body, is it not? I'm confused. You've told me soul is more important than the body. Then why should I use this body, which is less important, to fight this battle? The other question and doubt and confusion that Arjuna has is, you have said in chapter 2 that Jnana Yoga, you must use your intelligence rather than performing Karma Kanda or even Karma Yoga. So if you just got done telling me that I must use my intelligence, that doing Jnana Yoga is better than doing Karma Yoga, then why are you telling me to perform activities on the battlefield? Should I not use my intelligence to walk away? What's wrong with that? So Arjuna has actually misunderstood Krishna. And we also may have a tendency to misunderstand these instructions. That is why you need Guru to explain these concepts to you so that you can clarify your doubts. So Arjuna's question is, so should I renounce or should I work? Which is better? Because you've talked about both and you seem to have said in chapter 2 that renunciation is better than working. Now I'm confused. You're asking me to fight. Fighting is work. Renunciation means giving up things. So Krishna answers Arjuna's question now. Krishna explains there is Falgu Vairagya, which is false renunciation, and then there is real renunciation. Krishna tells Arjuna, your desire to walk away from the battlefield and go into the forest and meditate, that is false renunciation. Arey, why is that false renunciation? I don't want to fight. What's wrong with that? Then Krishna has to slowly explain to Arjuna, one by one, what is the difference between these different yoga paths. The Karma Kanda, then the Sakama Karma Yoga, Nishkama Karma Yoga, then Buddhi Yoga, Jnana Yoga. He has to, in chapter 2, Krishna went all the way to the top, up to Bhakti Yoga. Now he has to keep coming down the ladder and explaining to Arjuna because he went too far ahead and Arjuna could not understand. So Krishna essentially rewinds and starts from the base again to explain to Arjuna everything a little bit more in detail. So imagine somebody who has taken the vow to be a brahmachari or to be a sannyas, because he wants to be detached from the material world. He wants to give up everything and focus only on Lord Krishna. So externally, he is wearing the garbs of a brahmachari or a sannyasi. He is wearing a kavi vastra. But let us say a beautiful woman walks past him. And his mind immediately thinks, she's so beautiful. His mind gets agitated. Krishna says, this is false renunciation. He calls it pretending. Don't pretend to be a sannyasi if you're not ready to take up the sannyas card. See, Arjuna was pretending, I will take sannyas in the forest. To take sannyas, Krishna explains, you have to purify yourself first. And for that, there is a process. You can't prematurely renounce, thinking that I am suffering, I don't like what I'm experiencing, I just want to walk away. That is escapism. That is false renunciation. Don't prematurely leave your life behind because the situation is very difficult for you to handle. Because even for renunciation, you have to prepare yourself. It's not a small matter. So Krishna essentially explains to Arjuna the difference between real renunciation and false renunciation. To be really renounced requires a lot of practice, Arjuna. Don't think you can walk away to the forest. What will you do in the forest? Your mind will still be filled with desires. You're not ready for it. Then Arjuna says, okay, if I'm not ready for it, then what do I do? Then Krishna says, well, you are actually not ready for renunciation because you have not achieved purity of mind and intelligence and senses. So how are you going to achieve this? So better for you that you engage yourself in Nishkama Karma Yoga. That is what Krishna advises Arjuna. Don't prematurely give up your duties and responsibilities. Why don't you stay exactly where you are? Perform your duties, but without attachment to the results. So in this shloka, Karmendriyani sanyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyartan vimudhatma mithyacharasa uchyate. Krishna is saying, he who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So this is the false renunciation. Pretending that you're a Brahmana, pretending that you're a renunciate, and you're really not even prepared yourself for it. So the only person you're fooling is yourself. And society will call you a pretender. Look, he's wearing garb of sannyasi, but he's really not a sannyasi. His character does not indicate that he is a sannyasi. So Krishna says, stop pretending that you're a great Mahan yogi ready to go into the forest. You're not. You're not at all ready for that. So then what is real renunciation then? Yajñārtat karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanah tadartam karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. Krishna is telling Arjuna, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, Vishnu's satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. So Krishna has explained to Arjuna, you are really not ready for renouncing your life and going into the forest, because you have to prepare yourself to do that. Rather, you work. Who should you work for? So Krishna offers Arjuna a job. He says, work for me. Any which way, all of us have to work, Krishna says. There's not a single Jivatma in anywhere in this material universe who can survive without working. And since you anyway have to work, but do it as a sacrifice for me. Because if you don't work to please me, then you will be engaging in karmic activities. So Krishna is encouraging Arjuna, why don't you just simply perform your prescribed duties to satisfy me and me alone? By doing this, you will be free from all karma. So we need to understand, some people have this notion that the Bhagavad Gita talks about renunciation and giving up everything in life. Not at all. Quite the contrary. Krishna never tells us to leave our duties and responsibilities. Never. So Bhagavad Gita is not about leaving, it is about living. Understanding your duties and responsibilities and performing it to the best that you can. But Krishna says you can perform your work, you can be attached to results, nothing wrong with it. But it is better if you perform your work as a sacrifice to me. Don't worry about the outcomes. I am in control of the outcome. This is real renunciation. False renunciation is prematurely leaving your duties and responsibilities. Thinking I want to practice Krishna consciousness. I love this. I love the bliss that I'm experiencing. Let me run off to Vrindavan, or let me run off to any one of the holy dhams, give up my family and just focus on Krishna. No. There's not a shloka in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, give up your duties and responsibilities. Not a single shloka. But a lot of people misunderstand and think spiritual life means giving up everything. Spiritual life means simply adding Krishna to everything. That's the only difference. The difference between material life and spiritual life is one thing and one thing alone. In material life, Krishna is not present in the equation. In spiritual life, Krishna is present in everything that you do. Because everything that you do, you're doing it to please the Lord and Lord alone. That's the only difference. So none of us have to leave our positions that we are occupying today. Whatever varna we are in, whatever ashrama we are in, we should simply perform our duty as a matter of principle. So Krishna says, be attached to your duty, but it's better if you're detached from the results. If you get attached to the results, that will cause a lot of stress and anxiety. So then the next question is, fine, if I have to perform my duty, how can I do it in a way that doesn't cause karma? So now Krishna is going to talk about what is regulated activities. First we talked about Tyaga, T. Now we come to R, regulated activities. Yajna shishtashinas santo muchyante sarva kilvishaihi bhunjate te tvagam papa ye pachantyatma karanat. Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, the devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So Krishna begins with, how can you regulate what you eat? Krishna is telling Arjuna, eat only prasadam. Only honor, you should only honor prasadam. If you take something that is not prasadam, Krishna is telling him, well, you're actually consuming sin. So this is the first way in which we can regulate our activity. We talked about ABCD yesterday, changing your diet. You don't have to go on a diet. We just want to have a diet that is only prasadam. Every day, how many ever times you eat in a day, everything that you eat should be prasadam. So what is prasadam? Whatever you prepare at home, you have to offer it to the Lord first with the tulsi leaf. And then when you accept that, that is considered prasadam. So you offer bhoga to the Lord. After the Lord has accepted your bhoga, that becomes prasadam for us. So this is one way in which we can regulate a very simple activity. Krishna then talks about the differences of the ladders in yoga. There is a misconception, and even Arjuna misunderstands this. So there is, let's say there is karma yoga, there is jnana yoga, there is dhyana yoga, and then there is bhakti yoga. 4 types of yoga. Within them, there may be some branches. Arjuna has misunderstood thinking that these 4 paths are like an intersection, a road, a 4-way intersection. One path will take you somewhere else, another path will take you somewhere else, another path will take you somewhere else, and another path will take you somewhere else. So Krishna corrects Arjuna's understanding here. It is not a 4-way intersection. It is a ladder. You begin at the bottom and work your way up. Everybody's destination is the same. It's just some people are at the lower end of the ladder, some people are at the higher end of the ladder. That's all. So the lowest end of the ladder, that is if you are climbing on the ladder, is karma kanda. Karma kanda means you're performing your duties and responsibilities, but you have a desire for certain outcomes. Essentially materialism. But you do it as per what the Vedas instruct you. Of course, there are people who don't even follow the Vedas. So that means they are nowhere near the ladder. They are lost. But the bottommost rung of the ladder, as per the Vedic scriptures, is karma kanda, which means you have a lot of material desires. I want wealth. I want prosperity. I want fame. I want a good husband. I want a good wife. I want good children. I want knowledge. All of this I want is karma kanda. And the Vedas tell you, if you want to get that, what you should do, what puja you should do to get all of this. But your intent is you want to satisfy yourself and yourself alone. This is karma kanda. So karma kanda, that is also here, which is the sakama karma yoga, which is you're only interested in the results. You become very attached to the fruits of the work, and you also become attached to the work itself because you're enjoying the fruits of the work. That is Sakama Karma Yoga. One level higher than that is the Nishkama Karma Yoga, where you're not attached to the results, you're very much attached to your work as a sense of duty. So the Vedic system and the Vedas are set up in such a way that it is actually a ladder. Somebody yesterday was asking me, right? Should I go down this path? Is this the right path for me? Well, all paths are going upwards. It has to culminate in Bhakti Yoga, you see. So you can begin with Karma Yoga as a purificatory process. Only then you can take up Jnana Yoga. After you've done Jnana Yoga, the next stage is Dhyana Yoga, which is meditation. The final stage is Bhakti Yoga, which means even if you're practicing something else, you're on this ladder. The only question is, are you on the lower end of the ladder or are you on the upper end of the ladder? Are you closer to your destination or are you a little bit further away from your destination? So it's not an intersection. It's a ladder of progress. Then Krishna talks about a devotee of the Lord. What is their conduct? What should their behavior be? What should be their value system? You see, what will happen if I'm wearing a tilak and I claim myself to be a devotee of Krishna, but my conduct is most unbecoming? If I open my mouth and find fault with others, if I criticize others, if I speak harshly, what will be the first thing people say? She's wearing one nice nama, she's pretending to be a devotee. She has no character. So Krishna talks about how important it is, if you become his devotee, how you need to mind your manners and mind your conduct, because other people are watching. The only way people will get attracted to Bhakti Yoga is if they see devotees conducting themselves in an exemplary way. This is leadership. So what does Krishna talk about? Leadership. Yad yad acharati shreshtaha tat tat evetaro janah sayat pramanam kurute lokastadanu vartate. So Krishna is saying, whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So Krishna is reminding Arjuna, he is in the role of a leader. If a leader gives up and walks away from his responsibility, society will do the same thing. Common man will say, if the king has done this, if a Kshatriya has done this, it must be acceptable conduct, it must be acceptable behavior. Even I can do that. So Krishna is warning Arjuna, people are watching you. You are in a position of responsibility. Your actions must be exemplary because the world is watching. The citizens will follow what you do because you are their leader. So a few shlokas about leadership in chapter 3 from Krishna. So we are all also holding leadership positions. As parents, we are leaders. As teachers, we are leaders. Whatever role that you're playing, we are leaders if we are devotees of Lord Krishna. Hence, we are expected to act in such a way that we lead by example. We don't lead by speech alone. Preaching is wonderful activity. One can really get excited by preaching. But more important than preaching is your sadachar. If you're not living what you're preaching, then you're like that pretender that Krishna talks about. So we have to choose our leaders carefully. Krishna has talked about, in the next chapter, he will talk about the importance of Guru. So someone was asking, how do I know who to select as a Guru? Or how do I know if that person is the right Guru? So we have to use the principles taught by the Gita to identify a proper teacher. We need not be too choosy and too finicky about accepting a Guru. If that Guru is exemplifying conduct in accordance with Shastra, and he's always talking about Lord Krishna, you can accept that person as a Guru. But remember, first you have to be a good student in order to be a good teacher. So that means that Guru is a student eternally of Vedic scriptures. That Guru is always studying the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. Just because you become a teacher, your learning doesn't stop. Your thirst for knowledge, your thirst for realizations doesn't stop and must not stop. So a proper Guru is also always studying the Shastras. He's eternally a student and he's always trying to perfect himself because he's in a position of a leader. And then Krishna says, Arjuna, don't pretend to be a Brahmana and a renunciate and walk away. Be a Kshatriya because that's your status and role in society right now. That's the role that you're occupying. It is better that you perform your own duty than performing somebody else's duty. And then Krishna says, it is better that you perform your duty imperfectly than performing somebody else's duty perfectly. So the question is why? So even if we are unable to perform our duty perfectly, it is still a purificatory process. Performing somebody else's duty perfectly is not purifying. Performing your own duty, even if it is imperfect, Krishna says, is purifying. You're on the right path. You will make progress. Steadily, you will do that. So this is the importance that Krishna places on duty. Then Arjuna asks a very interesting question. He says, you've told me to perform my duty. Sometimes, as if compelled by an external force, I may not be able to perform my duty. And he asks, why does that happen? What is the cause of that? You know, sometimes you're very determined and sometimes you lose faith and give up. And Arjuna is asking, why does that happen? So even though I know the best course of action, sometimes you know what is right or wrong, but something forces you to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing or act in an incorrect way. Arjuna is asking, why does that happen? Why are we not able to control ourselves? Even though I know the best course of action, but what is it that impels me to act improperly and against my good intelligence? Can anybody answer this question? Why sometimes we act against
ignorance?
Ignorance, okay. Anybody else?
And our previous effects of previous karmas. leading to vasanas.
Okay. So what does Krishna say?
Consciousness, Mother.
Consciousness.
Influence of evil.
Influence of
Evil.
evil. Let's see what Krishna says.
Working with the expectations.
So procrastination is just to deviate from our regular duties and then getting deviated from our regular path. But then eventually at times we also get to realize that that is not the right path, and then get into more determined mode of doing it.
Yeah.
So you see the results of not doing it in a right path also keeps us in the right path.
So Krishna says the reason you succumb to doing the wrong thing sometimes is because of lust.
Vasanas and practice.
Lust.
So let's read the shloka. So to the question that Arjuna has asked, what is it that seems to force us to do something even though we know it's the wrong thing to do, but we end up doing it anyway? And Krishna says it's lust. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajo Gunasamudbhavah Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyenam Miha Vairinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring, sinful enemy of this world. Nitya Vairi means permanently this lust is your enemy. That's what Krishna is telling Arjuna. So Krishna uses a beautiful analogy to explain the degrees of lust that we all have to deal with. So the first example that he gives, or the analogy that he uses, is lust could be like fire that is covered by smoke. So which is a very light kind of lust that you can try and overcome with a little practice. And then one level higher than that, Krishna uses the analogy. It is like dust that is covering the mirror. You know, over a long period of time, if a mirror is lying unused and untouched, it will acquire a grime cover. And you have to clean it up to see yourself. That is deeper lust. And the deepest of lust, Krishna explains, is like an embryo trapped within the womb. Very hard to overcome that kind of lust. So we all have degrees of lust. Some lust we are able to control, some of the lusts that we have, we're not able to control. So Krishna is saying there are variations like this. Some are easy to control, some are not easy to control. So he uses the analogy of fire covered by smoke, dust covering a mirror, the womb trapping the embryo. The embryo wants to move, but it is restricted because of the womb. Now, lust is like this itch that is, the more you scratch it, the more you feel like continuing to satisfy that itch. So our lust, Krishna warns us, is never satisfied. Avrittam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurenanalena cha. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So originally we said our soul is Satchitananda. But because we have acquired many material bodies, the symptom of the soul, which is consciousness, gets contaminated by lust. The more we try to satisfy our lust, the more contaminated the consciousness is. The more we try to satisfy our lust, the further away you move from Krishna. So, okay, so now, Krishna, you've told me my problem is lust. Where does this lust reside? You told me this is the enemy. First of all, if lust is the enemy, where does this lust reside and how do I conquer it? So, battle plan number 1, how can I defeat this enemy? Krishna explains to Arjuna, this lust is hiding in 3 areas. In your senses, in your mind, and in your intelligence. So Krishna says the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, Arjuna. They're sitting very comfortably there. You've given them a nice throne and you're feeding them nice desires every day to try and fulfill. So through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Krishna says the reason why you lose your intelligence is because of your lust. Yesterday we talked, right? When your senses dwell on an object, you become attracted to it, and then you want it, you desire it. If that desire is not fulfilled, you get angry. If you get angry, you become bewildered. When you become bewildered, you lose your intelligence, and when you lose your intelligence, you are taking the wrong decisions. All of that is because of lust. And because of your lust, real knowledge about who you are gets concealed. Then you begin to believe you are this body. You forget that you are the soul. How do you forget you are the soul? When you're constantly trying to satisfy all your desires. Remember, Krishna said desires will be like rivers flowing into the ocean. You need not respond to every one of them. Definitely not the material desires. So what is battle plan number 2? We have to learn how to defeat the enemy. So this is regulated activity. So how do you control your senses? Not by going into the forest. So you can simply regulate the senses. One example Krishna has already given in a previous shloka that we just read. What is that example? How to control your senses? We just read the shloka a few slides back. What is one example to regulate your senses? What should we eat every day?
Prasadam.
Add
Prasad,
Krishna
prasad.
to life every day. That
Krishna to our life every day.
Dedicated prasadam.
We should only have prasadam, nothing else. So you see how you can begin to slowly control your sense. It's so easy. You don't have to change anything. You are eating food every day. Krishna says, anyway you have to eat. Why not offer it to me and then eat it? This is the beginning of your journey to try to control your lust. Yes? Simple activities that you can perform, beginning with the food that you consume. And Krishna also explains that the senses is easy to control because it is visible to you. The impact is visible to you. You can experience it. It is on the gross platform. So you begin by trying to control and exercise restraint of your body and the senses. Then you move to the mind, then you move to the intelligence. So what is battle plan number 3? So now what is left? You begin with your senses. So you control your tongue, you control your speech by accepting and honoring prasadam. You control what you hear by only hearing Krishna Katha as much as possible. You control your eyes by taking darshan of the Lord every day. You control your touch and your nose by smelling the flowers that were offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. In ISKCON, if anybody has ever visited ISKCON, if you've visited during Mangalarti or any one of the other artis, you will notice that one of the devotees will bring a palm of flowers in their hand. And you'll never see this in any other temple. And if you're new to ISKCON, you get confused. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to take a flower, or what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to smell that flower that was at the lotus feet of the Lord. This is how you engage your nose in serving Krishna. You smell the incense that is offered to the Lord. And then your sense of touch, you use that to serve the Lord. Some seva you should do. So then your mind and intelligence, battle plan number 3. How can you now begin to influence your mind and intelligence? Well, you have to chant, you have to hear, you have to read, you have to discuss. Most importantly, you have to apply the instructions given by the acharyas and by Krishna. So this is how Krishna says you can actually overcome lust. Just change everything you do, right? You're not changing your life at all. You're not turning it topsy-turvy. Do everything. You hear, but let's change your hearing. Change what you hear. You read every day, but read a little bit of Bhagavad Gita. You're discussing so many different topics a day. Discuss the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. You're engaging in so many practices. Incorporate some practices to satisfy the Lord as a sacrifice. We discussed yesterday the ABCD formula. Very simple. How do you begin this journey of replacing lower taste with higher taste? You associate with devotees or people who are in the Sattva Gun. You read books like Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam every day. You chant the holy names of the Lord every day. We must chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every day. Every day we must chant. Change your diet. Have only prasadam and also do some deity worship. This is a very, very simple formula for us to follow. Don't have to complicate your life more than this. So this is Karma Yoga. So Arjuna was lamenting in the first chapter. He forgot who he was. He forgot his identity. Krishna reestablishes his identity. And because now he knows who he is, Krishna now explains to him what is the job he needs to perform. What is his duty? Krishna also offers him a job. He says, come and work for me. Whatever you do, do it for me. If whatever you do it for me as a sacrifice, then you are automatically under my protection. You don't have to worry about anything else. Your life will be sublime. You will achieve the ultimate goal of bliss simply by working for me, Arjuna. So this is Karma Yoga section. I will just briefly cover the concept of karma because this will be important for us to understand. So this concept of karma, there is action, you perform a work or you perform a deed, and then there are outcomes. There are positive outcomes and negative outcomes. The positive outcome is called punya. The negative outcome we refer to as papa. Both of this together means karma. Karma doesn't only imply positive or doesn't only imply negative. It's a combination of both. So over a period of time, we have accumulated so much karma that it is sitting in like a bank account. Or rather, I will use the water tank analogy to explain this to you. So there is this water tank where you've deposited all of your karma. And each time you take birth, so imagine for the water tank to fill up, there has to be an inlet pipe, correct? And to then withdraw that water, there has to be an outlet pipe. Yes, 2 pipes. Through the many, many births, through the inlet pipe, you're depositing your karma into that water tank. And as long as you keep depositing, you have to keep taking birth. But when you take birth, you know what happens? Krishna is so merciful. He doesn't drain that entire water tank because you will not be able to handle it. Remember, in that water tank, there is a combination of Papa and Punya. Both of them are residing in that water tank. So what do? You make a withdrawal. The outlet pipe is steady. The inlet pipe you control through your activities. The outlet pipe is controlled by Krishna. How much you withdraw is determined by Krishna. So this is called prarabdha karma. The amount you withdraw from that water tank and come and take birth. And today what you're experiencing as karma is that seed which has fructified, that has matured. But then the mystical thing about this is that this is a vicious cycle. In this life, you are again performing karma. You withdraw a little bit and come. In this life, you are performing karma and you are still depositing from that inlet pipe into the tank. So for devotees of the Lord, we want to shut off that inlet. That's all we care about. We don't want to deposit in that water tank anymore. How can we stop that? How can we stop depositing in the tank?
By dedicating all actions to Krishna.
By dedicating
All actions to Krishna.
all actions to Krishna. By doing everything to please Krishna, that inlet pipe, Krishna says, is immediately shut off. Immediately. Not over a period of time. So let's say you become a devotee of Krishna. That inlet pipe is shut off. But there's still something in that tank, no? What happens to that? What happens to that?
Dissolved in Krishna.
Evaporates.
Definitely.
And who is helping you evaporate that?
Krishna.
Krishna. So simply by becoming a devotee of Lord Krishna, you not only shut off that inlet pipe, but Krishna evaporates whatever is in that tank. But then there's a little bit of outlet that you've come with now, right? You've extracted a little bit now and you've come in this birth. So whatever you are experiencing in this birth could be your last birth. Because Krishna has taken care of both. Prabhupada uses this wonderful analogy, this ceiling fan or any fan. When you shut off the electricity and turn off the switch, does the blade still move for a little longer?
Yeah.
Yes. Even
You
though
do.
the electricity is shut off,
Yes.
Inertia.
the blade
Yeah.
still move for a little while, right?
The restored kinetic energy keeps moving until it is
Yes.
exhausted.
But then does it eventually come to a stop?
Yes.
Yes. So similarly, when we become devotees of Lord Krishna, even though you're experiencing karmic reactions today, but if you take shelter of the Lord and you have surrendered to the Lord, that electricity supply is cut off. It's just that little momentum that is causing that blade to move a little longer. It will come to a stop. It has to come to a stop. That is the benefit of practicing Bhakti Yoga. One, your karmic reactions are immediately stopped. Immediately, if you continue to be a devotee, a practicing devotee of the Lord, no more birth and death for you. You're done with that tank. So this is the mercy of the Lord. So throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the superiority of practicing bhakti yoga alone, the superiority of worshipping him and him alone and nobody else. We will come to those chapters where Krishna says, only worship me, don't worship anybody else. Someone was asking yesterday, right? But I am attracted to. Krishna has an answer for that question. Worship me and me alone. Exclusively, Krishna says. Exclusively you should worship him. If you worship him, he takes care of the rest. Not anybody else. Not anybody else. So this is the importance of this chapter. So how does one achieve this result? Through practice, abhyasa. And by practice, you will achieve vairagya, detachment, all the things that are holding you back today from being blissful, being content, being peaceful, being compassionate. All of that gets taken care of when you surrender to Krishna and perform work as a sacrifice for him. Right? So we'll pause here. Vancha kalpadarupyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. I'm happy to
Hare
take any
Krishna, Hare
questions.
Krishna.
Those who need to drop off, feel free to drop off. For those who have questions, and I'm happy to take questions.
Hare Krishna Mataji, this is Lakshman here.
Yes.
I just have one question, madam. So, whatever we offer, whatever we take as a food is God given, and then again we take it as prasadam by offering that to God and with a tulsi leaf, and we consume it. It becomes a prasadam, right? And here, I just have a doubt. Right? For example. Lust is maybe it could be overeating or probably drinking or anything, but if we just take the name of Lord before eating or drinking, does it become sacred or a prasadam, or does it actually depurify us from from the lust? For example, if I'm consuming alcohol and I take the name of Lord Krishna and consume the alcohol, so or does it depurify me, or actually it is actually adding to the lust? So how is this?